first fighter planes and deep-water submarines, the earliest tanks, the first large-scale use of chemical weapons. When industrial-age technology and war first mixed on a large scale, the end result was ruthlessly efficient destruction. Now, World War I tech on Modern Marvels. World War I exposed the dark side of the Industrial Revolution. The technological achievements that created mass production, new forms of transportation, and countless inventions were now being put to use with devastating efficiency on the battlefield.
The development between 1865 and 1914 was remarkable. Steel technology, explosive technology, chemical technology, aviation, all of these elements added to what happened in World War I.
Tanks, airplanes, guns, submarines, and chemical warfare were all either created or refined in the wake of the Industrial Revolution. The creation of the assembly line resulted in fast and efficient mass production. Even human reproduction increased. Advances in hygiene and living standards sent populations skyrocketing throughout the late 19th century.
The growth of population and the growth of weapons potential meant that there was carnage on a level previously unanticipated in any war. You had more casualties in one battle during the World War I than all of the casualties on both sides in the American Civil War. The carnage was huge. Something on the order of 8 million soldiers were killed and 12 million civilians were killed.
But this carnage didn't spring from nowhere. The stage for conflict was set some 40 years before the first shot was ever fired. In a series of European alliances, territorial disputes and geographic vulnerabilities drove countries to commit to war if any member of an alliance was attacked. An alliance linked Austria-Hungary with Germany. Tiny Serbia allied with Russia, as did France. To balance the powers on the continent, England joined Russia and France.
Everybody was lined up on one side or another, and all it took was a single spark to ignite the war.
That spark, on June 28, 1914, was the assassination by a Bosnian Serb of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne.
The insult of having this man assassinated ignited a war between Austro-Hungarian Empire and Serbia.
As Germany joined Austria-Hungary, so Russia backed Serbia. Within days, France and England had entered the fray. But Europe was ill-prepared for the consequences of what would become its first large-scale modern war. Neither alliance was able to sustain a mobile offensive against the other after the first few months of the war. So both sides dug in along the Western Front near the northeast border of France, stretching 500 miles from Switzerland to the English Channel. A system of parallel trenches came to symbolize this paralysis. It became both home and grave to many stationed there.
Modern war is now mechanized. It's a killing machine. A lot of people are going to get killed, and it's for naught. You're going to settle down into a stalemate. Neither side will be able to achieve a decisive victory over the other, and it will be a war of attrition, and the last guy standing will win, but what's he want?
Clifford Holliday joined up as a bugle boy at 16 years old. At 105, he was the last surviving World War I combat veteran from Canada.
I think of it back now, it's a shadow. I know it's there, I know it happened, I know it's real. There's a good chance you're not coming back. I mean, fairly good chance you're not coming back. I spent my 70th birthday in the front line trenches.
One of the most innovative of all World War I technologies was the tank. The creation of the tank was a direct response to the stalemate of trench warfare. 6,000 miles of the roughly 9-foot wide and 7-foot deep trenches traced the Western Front. Barbed wire was strewn in front of the trenches, and sandbags sometimes provided a protective barrier. Machine gun nests bristled with sprays of bullets. In the desolate ribbon of no man's land between the belligerents were bomb craters, tree stumps, burning villages, and the bodies of soldiers from both sides. The challenge was to find something that would just plow through them. The tank was the answer.
There are antecedents to the tank. Da Vinci has drawings, which are these war machines, he calls them. But they didn't have the technology until they married the idea of the Holt tractor, which was a tracked vehicle, up with an armored cab, and then drive it over the barbed wire and put machine guns or cannon on it to suppress the enemy's machine gun nest.
The British quickly developed the Mark series of tanks. Beginning with the Mark I, the tank applied a host of technologies: the internal combustion engine, steel plating, mounted machine guns, plus the all-important tracks instead of wheels.
The tread is the key because it can go over terrain that no wheel can go over. It's harder to bog. And the reason is it has a broad surface area, so it has a very light pounds per square inch on the ground. So in soft, muddy ground, it has a better chance of staying afloat above the ground rather than sinking in.
With a crew of 6 men, the early British tanks could travel at about 3 miles an hour. 2 men worked the delicate 100 horsepower engine, which sat exposed inside the tank. Though the British were quick to make improvements on the Mark series tanks, they remained extremely uncomfortable and even lethal inside throughout the war.
Temperatures could rise up over 100 degrees in there. The stink of oil and gasoline and exhaust vapors filled the inside of the vehicle. The engine is right inside the fighting compartment. Driving this thing would be similar to driving your car if you sat underneath the hood with it closed next to the engine. As machine gun bullets beat on the hull, the sounds of that ringing, that cacophony, is added to the roar of the motor. Worse yet, spall splashed off the inside of the hull of the vehicle. Fragments of the steel plating and paint would cut the faces and the hands, any exposed flesh of the crewmen.
So now you've got a vehicle with no suspension system going 4 miles an hour. It's 120 inside and you're in leather. So how long are you going to last? Well, the answer is probably not long. So they had drawbacks to them. However, given the alternative, there was no comparison.
In January of 1916, the British deployed the tank for the first time.
The first tank attack in the Battle of the Somme, 36 tanks were put into place. They did almost nothing except give away the idea. But a year later at Cambrai, nearly 400 tanks were put into effect, and they busted the German trenches, which showed what tanks could do. They could bust the trenches, and they advanced 6,000 yards.
Meanwhile, the French, with the aid of the Renault company, were developing their own lighter tanks. At roughly 7.5 tons, they were a quarter the weight of the heavy British tanks.
The standard French light tank is the FT-17. It could be armed with a machine gun or a 37mm gun. It had 2 men inside. The communication between the tank commander gunner and the driver was a bit crude. The way they did that was the tank commander would kick the driver in the direction he wanted to go.
At 6 miles an hour, the French tanks were twice as fast as the British tanks. They also incorporated a rotating turret.
The French innovation of the rotating turret tank was extremely important. Instead of having to have 6 or 8 guns located all around the surface of the tank to shoot from every angle, you could have 1 gun that could shoot from every angle.
One of only 2 surviving unmodified FT-18 French tanks was recently discovered in a dump in Afghanistan, where it had likely been discarded in the 1920s. It was donated to the George S. Patton Museum in Fort Knox, Kentucky for restoration.
This tank is operated by a series of control rods, a regular gas pedal, a regular clutch, and a regular shifter. The turret of the tank was a one-man turret. It was traversed by the gunner. It had no powered traverse mechanism. He would just lean back into 2 shoulder mounts and turn the turret. There are vision slits around the hatch. This represents the crew's only way of seeing out of the tank. This is the entrance and exit from the turret, which would be immediately